You have selected the shorter training mission. Your aircraft starts in active pause, within visual range of the fleet. The U.S. Navy defines 3 different types of recovery to a carrier, depending on the current weather conditions. Case 1 is a daytime visual recovery flown when the cloud deck is higher than 3,000 feet and visibility is greater than 5 miles. On this mission, we will learn how to do a Case 1 recovery on the Boeing T-45C, following the procedures of the NATOPS flight manual. This training mission includes the following sections. Configure pilot's viewpoint and HOTAS, optional, pattern entry and pattern circuit following supercarrier procedures, recovery and/or wave off, and an optional shutdown. Press spacebar to begin. Please, be aware that you can press spacebar to interrupt long texts. We have just unpaused the simulator. Please increase the throttle to keep a speed of at least 300 knots, and trim the aircraft for stable and level flight. Today we have a crosswind from our left, so the HUD's pitch ladder and velocity vector are shifted to the right of the display, to show the actual aircraft flight path. This is called uncaged HUD mode, and it is the default mode of the HUD. In anticipation of adjusting the DCS pilot's viewpoint, let's switch to caged mode by pressing the C key or the cage button on the flight stick, if binded. Good, the flight ladder and the velocity vector are now centered on the HUD display, and a ghost velocity vector is added to show the true flight path of the aircraft. Press spacebar to continue. DCS shows on our monitor a simulated point of view that, depending on our hardware and software configuration, sometimes does not provide a good view of the aircraft's HUD. Press backspace if you need guidance on setting up a proper viewpoint, or press spacebar to leave it as it is. The carrier recovery circuit requires quick and precise control of your aircraft. Taking your view down, to click at aircraft controls, is a big no-no. You really need to be able to operate switches and levers without looking at them. If you already have your HOTAS configured to your satisfaction, press spacebar to skip this section. Else, press backspace for tips on how to configure it. The carrier recovery process starts once you enter the carrier control area, CCA, which is a 50-mile radius circle around the carrier. 3 different types of recovery can be expected depending on the current weather conditions. Case 1 is a daytime visual recovery, flown in when the cloud deck is higher than 3,000 feet and visibility is greater than 5 miles. Case 2 is used when weather conditions require instrument flight during the descent but allow visual flight near the carrier. Case 3 is an instruments recovery, used at night or when the weather is below Case 2 minimums. Press spacebar to continue. Once inside the carrier control area, you should check in on Marshal frequency employing an inbound radio command. Marshal will provide recovery holding instructions and pass the ship's weather, altimeter setting, and ship's heading, BRC. After receiving directions from Marshal, you will set up to enter the holding pattern over the carrier. At 10 miles, you should have the carrier in sight and report, "See you at 10," over the radio. The Marshal controller will hand you off to the carrier's tower and you will enter the holding stack. You should wait for the tower to clear you to leave the holding pattern and commence your landing approach. You will then descend from holding and fly by the carrier just outboard on the starboard side at 800 feet altitude. Once ahead of the carrier, you will give a kiss-off command to your flight and execute an overhead brake to the left to enter the landing pattern. The members of your flight will continue ahead and execute their own brake to enter the pattern behind you. At 3/4 nautical mile behind the ship, you will enter the groove and report in with the landing signal officer, LSO, with a ball radio call. You will fly the rest of the approach and landing based on visual indications on the IFLAL's ball, and verbal instructions given by the LSO. If all goes well, you will catch one of the arresting wires with your tail hook and taxi to parking. If not, you will either wave off, abort the approach and re-enter the landing pattern, or bolter, briefly touch down on the deck and then re-enter the landing pattern. Press spacebar to unpause and put to practice these concepts. As we are currently inside the 50 nautical miles of the carrier control area, we should contact the carrier on its Marshal frequency by employing an inbound radio command. We will employ the COM1 radio, as currently it is the only one that has a PTT binding implemented. For this mission, the carrier's ATC frequency is 255.75 MHz, and it is already tuned on the COM1 radio. Press the PTT binding to initiate communication. The DCS communications menu should appear. Select F5, ATC, F3, CVN 75 Harry S. Truman, F1, inbound.
Marshall 222, marking mops 267, 23, Angels 3, state 1.6.
You will hear your virtual self contacting Marshall, stating your call sign, position, altitude, and fuel state. Then Marshall will respond with the ship's weather, altimeter setting, and ship's heading, tell you the Case I procedure should be followed, and remind you to contact him again once you reach 10 nautical miles from the carrier. You will automatically acknowledge with your side number as call sign. Press spacebar to continue the mission. The holding altitude assigned to our flight is 2,000 feet, and the holding stack takes the form of a circle to the left side of the carrier, as shown on the picture. The landing pattern superimposes on it, but it's set to a lower altitude of 800 feet, so there are no conflicts among the aircraft that are waiting for carrier recovery at any given time. We have unpaused the mission. Begin a descent so that you reach 2,000 foot altitude by the time we reach 10 nautical miles from the carrier. Set the low altitude warning cue to 2,000 feet on the data entry panel to get a warning if we get below that level. Make use of the trim bindings on the HOTAs to make more subtle changes to the pitch attitude of the aircraft. If you want, you can make use of the time acceleration bindings of DCS. Make sure to have the aircraft in stable flight before accelerating time. Don't maneuver the aircraft while on time acceleration. Return time to normal before touching the stick. We will interrupt time acceleration whenever the mission needs your attention. You are now 10 nautical miles from the carrier. We should contact Marshall again with a "See you at 10" radio command. Press the PTT. The DCS communications menu should appear. Select F2, "See you at 10." You will hear your virtual self calling up Marshall. Marshall will answer with a request to update our fuel status and handing over control of our flight to Tower, which handles operations at less than 2,000 feet. You automatically respond with your fuel state and then should proceed to enter the holding pattern of the carrier. When you enter the holding pattern and are within 4 miles of the carrier, you will hear an automatic call from your pilot contacting Tower. As there are no more aircraft waiting for recovery, Tower will immediately give you the Charlie call sign, authorizing you to leave the holding pattern and immediately proceed to enter the recovery pattern.
1.5.
Head towards the trailing ship of the fleet, reduce speed and altitude, so that you arrive over the ship at 250 knots and 800 feet.
222.
You are now just over the trailing ship, turn hard left. The carrier heading is 10 degrees, fly parallel to it at 250 knots and 800 feet. Aim for the ship that is ahead and to the right of the carrier, where we will initiate the brake maneuver. Extend the tail hook, using the H key, or by clicking on the hook lever. Click on the master warning button to cancel the alarm. If we had any AI wingmen, at this point we would transmit a kiss-off radio command. The members of our flight would then continue ahead and execute their own brakes, to enter the pattern behind us at 15 to 20 second intervals. Initiate a level brake to the left, strive to maintain 800 feet until you have completed the brake. Extend speed brakes, increase throttle if the speed falls below 170 knots. Extend landing gear and flaps, speed should be 225 knots. Descend to 600 feet and use trim to attain optimum AOA speed. Check speed brakes. Downwind heading is 190 degrees. We are now on the downwind leg of the carrier recovery circuit. At this point the pilot should perform the landing checklist. I've paused the mission to have time to explain each step. Landing gear, confirm it's down, by looking at its 3 green lights. Flaps, check that you have full flaps deployed, by looking at the flap indicator. A resting hook, confirm it is down, by checking its lever. Speed brakes, check they are extended, by looking at its lights. The recovery circuit is done with the speed brakes deployed in order to keep the engine on a higher power setting, useful in case of a missed recovery. Anti-skid, confirm it is off, either looking at the switch or at the advisory light. Press spacebar to unpause the simulation and continue the circuit. Now turn left, towards the ship just behind the carrier. Maintain optimum AOA speed and descend to 500 feet. Turn left again to enter the groove, rolling out wings level 3/4 of a mile astern of the ship, in line with the angled deck. Once in the groove, with wings level, and the ball in sight, you should transmit ball from the ATC radio menu. The LSO will start giving verbal directions to help your recovery.
1.3.
Touchdown. Power to max, retract, bolter. Add full power, retract speed brakes and maintain level attitude. Climb to 600 feet and re-enter the circuit for another pass. Now turn left, towards the ship just behind the carrier. Maintain optimum AOA speed and descend to 500 feet. Turn left again to enter the groove, rolling out wings level 3/4 of a mile astern of the ship, in line with the angled deck. Once in the groove, with wings level, and the ball in sight, you should transmit ball from the ATC radio menu. The LSO will start giving verbal directions to help you recover.
1.2.
Touchdown. Power to max, retract speed brakes. The landing signals officer will grade each landing and display the coded results at the top right of your screen. Unfortunately, the Supercarrier currently is set only for the FA-18 Hornet, and for other carrier aircraft of DCS the FLOLS gives erroneous instructions, and the grade codes are not accurate. Your grade is displayed very briefly, but you can also see it using the Messages History option of the mission menu, which you can display by pressing the Escape key. Press spacebar to continue. Once the aircraft has stopped, reduce power to idle and allow the aircraft to roll back a short distance. Hold the wheel brakes to prevent the aircraft from moving, and raise the hook. Raise flaps completely, make sure to close the air brakes. Look around, a flight director will provide you with directions to clear the landing area. You can recognize him by the purple marking over his head. Employ view zoom if needed, to clearly recognize his hand signals. The taxi route to parking will be assigned after detaching from the arresting wire, and it will depend on parking availability and deck conditions. For this mission, we will be directed to parking spot number 6. When taxiing to parking, precisely follow deck crew commands. Each flight director covers just a portion of the taxi route. The magenta icon over their heads will tell you which one to obey. You have stopped. Press spacebar if you have received the stop command from the plane captain. Okay, steer towards the active flight director or plane captain, then follow his hand signals. The last flight director, near your assigned parking spot, will transfer control to the brown shirt plane captain assigned to your aircraft. Once at the correct spot, the plane captain will give you a stop command. At that moment, apply wheel brakes and set the throttle to idle. You have stopped. Press spacebar if you have received the stop command from the plane captain. Press backspace if you want to learn the after landing and shutdown procedures, or press spacebar if you prefer to end the training now. Congratulations, you have successfully finished this training mission. Exit the training by pressing the spacebar key.